Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie and today we are back with another mukbang. Woo! And I'm really excited because we're having delicious food. Okay, we're gonna be eating Mexican food today. This is from a place called Ha Ha Ha.
But it spells
Ja. Okay, sorry. So this is from a place called Ha 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 Mexican food in New York City. We got the burrito from there. We also got this almond horchata tea. We also have the chocolate churros from there, and I have this.
Can't hear you, baby.
And I have this that got ruined on the way. It's like a coconut
Oh, we gotta
cake.
eat that. Oh my
I'm
god.
so excited. Okay, so we're gonna keep the coconut cake here because
What's
it's been
more
ruined.
important?
Ouch.
A dessert that
Yes.
looks like 10 out of 10
Yeah.
amazing looking, or it just 10 out of 10 amazing tasting.
Okay.
But
you
looks
know
like
what?
poo poo.
10 out of 10 tasting.
Okay.
Oh my god.
What is it? What score? Quick.
9.
7.
Okay, starting off brutal. I'm getting stressed now. And then we have another place called Taqueria 86. And we've got the elote, we have the birria sauce, we have the birria burrito, the birria quesadilla, and then the birria tacos, and a different type of burrito. I'm gonna figure it out, okay? I know the food's gonna be good today because look at the array of sauces that they've given me. And any Mexican spot that I go to where I get an array of sauces on the side, it's banger. With that being said, I just wanna say, do you have hemorrhoids? Let's say I do. Would I write it down on a piece of paper to pass it to my best friend that's on the other side of work? No, you wouldn't, because you would be the talk of the town. The whole office would be sitting there like, oh my god, did you know? No wonder she's been sitting weird. She's got hemorrhoids. Well, that's what you're doing if you're not using a VPN when you are on your devices. Listen, I'm obsessed with ExpressVPN, you guys know this, but if you don't use a VPN, you are sending data over an unencrypted internet connection, and it's like passing a note without even folding it up, without putting it into an envelope. ExpressVPN is a virtual private network that creates this secure tunnel between your device and the internet. In other words, it makes sure that no one else can sneak a peek at your letter. I mainly use ExpressVPN because I'm so paranoid about the internet safety, but it's not because I do anything crazy. I'm just logging into my email or like my bank accounts. That's it. And if you are like me, you gotta be careful. Every time you connect to an unencrypted Wi-Fi network, such as the ones at hotels, coffee shops, even the one at home, you're at risk without a VPN. A hacker connected to the same unencrypted Wi-Fi network can steal your personal information with only basic knowledge. They could even gain access to your passwords, financial details, even your emails. ExpressVPN protects you from those hackers by encrypting your network data, and they do it so well that it would take a supercomputer billions of years to crack it. So your hemorrhoid secret, safe with us. Plus, did you know even if you're not worried about hackers, your internet service provider can see everything that you do, even in incognito mode? In the US, they can sell your data to ad companies, but in the UK and Australia, internet service providers keep a log of websites that you visit and apps that you use and even private conversations that you have for 1 to 2 years. That is why you need to use ExpressVPN. The way that they do it is they reroute your traffic through their servers, which also masks your unique IP address, which, side note, you can change your online location with a click of a few buttons. And ExpressVPN has servers in 94 countries, so you can appear to be from any one of them. It's great for safety, but also great for Netflix, Hulu, and Prime Video, because sometimes there are movies on Netflix that aren't available in the US that are in other countries. Literally 10 out of 10. I would never go anywhere without ExpressVPN on all of my devices, so make sure to check out expressvpn.com/bis to find out how you can get 3 months free. That's expressvpn.com/bis to find out how you can get 3 months free. Thank you, ExpressVPN, for sponsoring today's video, and let's get into it. I'm gonna get into it. I gotta open up all my sauces because this is the real game. I'm not playing. I'm so excited. I feel like
They're
I
all
haven't
different?
Yes, I feel like I haven't had Mexican food in so long. I have to try the horchata.
Whoa.
It's spicy.
Oh.
Oh, which color? Which one?
Try the green sauce.
Oh, yeah. You
Oh
would
my
think
God.
that the green is easy because, you know.
No. I know they're spicy, but some places are just more spicy than the others.
Oh, that's good. Oh, the green is bad? Like super spicy?
It's so good.
How much? Like this?
Oh yeah, all the way. Like use it as a spoon. Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
That's good. Yeah. Wait, your green looks different from mine.
Oh, my green looks different from yours. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mine's more
Oh,
liquidy.
you gotta just mine. Yeah.
Wow.
Actually, not that bad. Try this red one. No, eat that.
I can't just dip it.
Okay.
Okay. You got the red. Mmm. Mmm. Are you trying to kill me? Ooh. Ooh. There's a kick at the...
It's not a kick. It's not just a kick.
My mouth is on fire. Okay, delicious. I'm gonna go in for a churro because that coconut cake was delicious. I'm assuming the churro is gonna be even more delicious. Mm-hmm.
Oh. Wow. So crispy.
Oh my god. I could marry that churro. What do we do about that? While you cut it with a knife, I have a very pressing question to ask. Are you depressed? Okay, that's a little aggressive. Maybe a little too aggressive. Let me try this.
Wait a minute. This is not what I was expecting. Is this not a burrito? It is, right?
Which side do you want? Wow. Okay,
let's
that's
try
gonna
it.
be crazy. Which side do you want, green or
It
red?
doesn't matter. You pick.
I'm gonna go with the green. I feel like it's gonna be, wow, it looks delicious. I like the sauce coating.
How is it?
Oh my god. It's so good. I need to eat it with a fork though. Wow.
What the heck?
It's incredible. Okay, let me compare it with, that's ha ha ha. Let me compare it with Taqueria 86
Oh my god, it's so good.
in the burrito sauce.
Is it better? The first one's better? What?
Wow.
But these look so good too.
They look so good, but the first one is better. I don't know what it is, but wow. I wish I could explain to you. I'm gonna pour some more salsa in here. Wow.
Wait, why do I kind of like this one more?
Really? Okay, here's a salsa bite.
I think the one for Ha 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 is more flavorful.
Very flavorful. Wow.
Where's the
So
churros
good.
from? Wherever churros from wins.
Ha ha ha.
Ha 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 wins.
Elote is delicious. Everything is so good. The sauces are so good. The sauces, she said. The salsas, okay? Wow. Okay, let's try a bite of the quesadilla, and then we're gonna get into it.
Yes.
Because are you depressed? Like I said, that's a little bit aggressive. That's so spicy. But genuine question, are you a little depressed? Or maybe you're a little bit anxious. Maybe you're hearing some voices in your head, ones that probably shouldn't be there. And that's okay, because it's mental illness, babes. You're like, wow, where is she going with this? Please delete your angry paragraph. We are all suffering from some sort of mental illness, are we not?
Are you okay?
It's so spicy, but I gotta keep going. I gotta keep going, it's so good.
How's the taco? Good?
Wow. You know what's good? The corn. Wow. Now, imagine 10 minutes with one of the most world-renowned doctors, and all of that is gone. Poof. No more. Evaporated. Gone like the inches of your ex-boyfriend that he claimed he had. Did you get that joke? Thank you. Okay. Just gone. It's no longer there. No depression, no anxiety, no sort of mental illness. Everything is gone. It sounds good, right? What if all violence had been eradicated in the world? It sounds like one of those weird Hunger Games futuristic sci-fi movie where there's no violence ever, but humans are so drawn to violence that people start paying to watch things like the Squid Game. But aren't we already paying Netflix to watch Squid Game? So like, are we already there? But you know what I mean, okay?
Deep.
Deep focus, Stephanie. How would society look without any mental illness or no violence? How would it look? Is that a society that you want to live in? And is it worth abandoning everything for this utopia? Like, at what cost would you be willing to make sure that these things were gone forever? Doesn't that sound like a futuristic question? But it was already attempted in the past. Oh yeah. And clearly, it was so successful. clearly. I love the anxious feeling that my stove is gonna explode out of nowhere anytime I pass by it the past few days. I've been doing this, and that is completely, I've been literally doing this sometimes, walking past the stove, and that is a completely normal feeling. And I choose to live my life like this.
You're being for real?
Yeah. I don't like being near the air fryer when it's on, because I feel like it's gonna...
So you dab every time you're like...
I just dab.
Rice cooker, dab.
Stove.
Dab.
Yeah, but it's weird because when I'm using the stove, I'm not creeped out. But when it's just quiet, I feel like it's plotting something. I feel like it's too quiet.
You're unique.
Okay, but no, seriously, they tried to get rid of mental illness and violence in the past, and they did it with two simple things. Can you think about the two things? Can you take a guess? And these are two things that you can find in a local store.
Cocaine. No, oh,
Cocaine.
sorry.
So they had an ice pick and a hammer. Do you know what a lobotomy is? Because we're going to talk about being lobotomized. Because this sounds like a B-grade sci-fi novel. It is so what the fork. I don't even know what to say about it. Which, side note...
How long ago was that?
In the 60s.
60s? That's not too far back.
Yes, it's crazy. And did you know it's pretty common? Like back then, even President JFK's sister got a lobotomy, and no, it wasn't successful. So if you're like, what the hell is a lobotomy? Let me tell you. Or rather, let me show you this picture. I don't even understand or comprehend how this is okay. But you know, whenever you get even the tiniest bit of dust in your eye, you start rapidly blinking and you feel like scraping at your retina, you will stop an entire road of traffic because something is in your eye and you're willing to rub it out with dirty ass hands because it's that primal feeling of like, oh my god, something's in my eye, I gotta get it out, right? Well, back then, they would stick full-on ice picks, like thicker than these chopsticks, into your eye sockets and then hammer it into your brain.
I just want to know who came up with this.
I'm about to tell you. I'm about to tell you, they're crazy.
Like...
Crazy. Yeah, I'm dead serious. And it all started with a guy that looked like this. Why do they always look like this? He was a Portuguese neurologist by the name of Antonio Moniz. He felt like there was a connection between mental illness and the frontal lobes of your brain. He thought since the frontal lobes of your brain are executing higher level tasks compared to the rest of your brain, if you sever the connections between the lobes, it would lead to a more compartmentalized patient. That was just his thought. He didn't even know if it would work, but he was a curious cat, and he was gonna die trying, okay? Well, no, he wasn't gonna die trying. His patients were gonna die with him trying. That's besides the point, right? Anyway, he tested his initial lobotomy theory on his patients, and he did this by drilling holes into their skulls. Literal holes. He said that he was inspired by this ancient procedure which someone would carve a hole into their skull to release bad spirits.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, since the brain, you know, they were considered trapped. There was no way out of the head or the brain, so they would drill a hole, right? And he was inspired by it, but he wanted to go a step further. He wanted to drill holes and then insert picks into the skull and essentially fuck around. He initially tested the theory on 20 patients and recorded a significant change in their behavior, which sometimes I'm just so amazed by this. But the fact that someone could just fall the wrong way on their spine and they're dead. But back then, we were just cutting into people's brains and poking at it to make them happier people. I don't know, it just sounds so confusing. How did people survive?
Exactly.
Yeah, like one bad dip in a bug-infested lake and you're done.
I guess there's no, like, internet, so you can't do research. You can't hear about how many people who died, maybe.
Oh.
You just hear about, oh, so-and-so did it and they're fine. You know, this made me think of, like, how far the medical has come. But then I think about, I told you about this, I had a procedure done when I was young. I was a skinny boy.
Why you gotta make that pause in that face? He goes, I was a skinny boy. What kind of reaction are you waiting for?
No, babe, you were buff. No, I was a skinny boy.
Okay.
My grandparents felt like they've been feeding me a lot, but I was very skinny. So they think there's something wrong with me. So they took me to some traditional Chinese medicine people. I started taking a lot of herbal medicine, which is fine. But then they also did a procedure on me. Did you know that?
You told me. Is it something to do with your hands?
Yes. They're saying there's something at this spot. There's something in here that's like preventing me from having my appetite. They stab and then like a little piece of muscle or something popped out.
Oh, you just got assaulted. I don't think you had a procedure.
No. And then he cut it off. So he cut it like a probably 2 rice grain size of tissue, like yellow tissue out of my hand. Apparently that cured my appetite, which I don't think is true at all because I look the same afterwards. I've just never heard things like that. Now I think back, it doesn't kind of make sense.
Hey, I got biopsied. It's kind of the same thing, no? See,
It's
I
weird.
don't know. I feel like I believe in herbal medicine because I do believe in the power of food.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe in the power of nutrients and stuff.
Yeah.
I believe in even positive thinking, not because I'm like positive thinking,
But mental health,
Yeah,
yeah.
cortisol levels and stress levels, right? But
Yeah.
that is kind of questionable.
That's what I'm saying.
So he tested it on 20 patients and all of them reported feeling better after their surgery. So when it was all settled, Antonia was the pioneer of lobotomies. Now, to be clear, there were people who were outraged by this from the get-go. They're like, please, how dare you skewer her brain for being depressed? She was just a child. It's not her fault. But the alternative back then was seemingly if you're deemed mentally unsound, you get sent to a treatment facility where they electrocute your brain nonstop. They abuse you emotionally, mentally, physically, and oftentimes sexually until you're a drooling zombie. And I'm serious, that is the alternative. So a lot of professionals argued that lobotomies were actually the more humane and ethical way to treat mental illnesses. At least this gave a patient a fighting chance to live a quote normal life. Which, side note, a lot of the conversations around lobotomies, around where it took place is in the US because you'll see why later, right? But all of Europe was really into lobotomizing people. It was like the newest mental health trend. Seriously, especially the UK and Sweden, they actually performed more lobotomies per capita than the US did. So a lot of freaking people were lobotomized in the world. And Sir Wiley in London was the leader of revolutionizing lobotomies in Europe. He was a neurosurgeon just like his daddy, and he's been described as one of the great medical men of the 20th century. And it's said that he alone has performed over 3,000 lobotomies. He would travel around just lobotomizing people. Sometimes on the weekend, on his off days. I don't know if it was to keep him sharp, pun intended, or if he was trying to make extra money, or if he thought it was fun. But he would just travel from hospital to hospital on his off days, lobotomizing more people. This guy was borderline addicted to giving people lobotomies. It was incredibly strange. And he was super efficient too. He once said, "It's not a time-consuming operation. A competent team in a well-organized mental hospital can do 4 operations in 2 hours-ish. It takes a trained neurosurgeon 6 minutes and seldom takes more than 10 minutes to perform a lobotomy." Which... You're severing my brain connections and drilling holes into my skull to peep around? I suggest that you take more than 10 minutes, doctor. You're telling me that you can drill into my skull faster than I can hang a painting on the wall using the same goddamn drill? Absolutely not. I'm not doing it. Sir Wiley was so beloved that he was knighted by the royal courts for his contribution in medicine. But later, after his death, when the patients were revisited, they fell into 3 exact groups. It was almost like a third. There was 1/3 of people that felt better after the lobotomy. They're like, I feel good. I don't feel depressed anymore. I don't feel anxious.
Serious?
Yeah. And then 1/3 felt no change, if not just trauma from the event itself. And then 1/3 said that they were worse off than they were before the lobotomy. Which, that's a lot of patients. I mean, the risk of it making your life worse was pretty high. For example, let's talk about Derek Hutchinson. Derek was admittedly born into a pretty rough family. His dad was a metal welder by day and a bare-knuckle boxer by night. And his mom was a housewife that resorted to just drowning away her sorrows in alcohol. So basically, Derek raised himself. And when kids raise themselves, they're gonna be a little rough around the edges, right? They're not gonna be not troublemakers most of the time. They need their parents to be their parents. So when Derek was 10, just 10, he was with another neighborhood troublemaker and they were climbing on the roof of a museum just for fun. It's not like they were trying to steal a painting or the Mona Lisa or something. Maybe they just wanted a view. They were caught by the police and Derek's mom threw her hands up and she told the police, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. I am out of options. I can't control this kid. I'm so stressed. Please, you gotta help me with something. So Derek is shipped off to a reform school for boys, and from there, Derek starts acting out even more. He stole a whole tractor and took it for a joyride, and he was eventually expelled, but he just kept picking fights. So he was a bit rough around the edges. He wasn't a bad person by any means. I mean, by the time that he was in his 20s, he's married, he's got 3 kids, he's trying to hold down his job to put food on the table, and then at 27 years old, he woke up with a headache. It was like a migraine. He's so confused. It was like the worst headache that he'd ever had in his life. But he assumed it would pass, you know, because you get a headache, the next day you're fine. But not long after, another headache. And not long after that, another headache. So Derek went to the doctors about these headaches, and they were like, oh, well, if your head hurts, that means there's something wrong with your head. Derek was freaking confused because, no, there's not. I'm fine. It's just a headache. I just need some medicine for my headache. But they involuntarily had him admitted into the psych ward. And for a month, an entire month, he was kept there, drugged up, put through 8 sessions of electroshock therapy where he was electrocuted to the head. And he said the feeling of being electrocuted in your head. Imagine you're standing up against a wall and a wrecking ball comes and slams into your face, backs off, slams into your face over and over and over again. And even with all of these sessions, the nurses and doctors were confused. Sir, he just keeps getting angrier. I mean, yeah, we are holding him hostage here and electrocuting him in a torture chamber, but I don't know why he's so angry. He's such an angry man. He is full of rage. I think he's got severe mental issues. So the psychiatrist recommended Derek undergo a lobotomy. Now, Derek refused, but somehow the doctors got him in the operating room, knocked his ass out on the table, and brought in his wife, and was like, hey, you're gonna give us permission to do this lobotomy. She's a nurse, by the way. Not here, but a nurse in her career, right? And the doctors peel back the skin on his forehead. They drill 2 holes into his skull, and when those holes were done, they inserted these nylon balls into the holes. Then from there, they're going to insert the metal rods to lobotomize him, right? And in that moment, his wife refused. She stopped the entire operation. She's like, I can't do it. You're not doing this to my husband. Absolutely not. But he still had these holes in his skull and these nylon balls protruding out. So what do? They let him go, but with these nylon balls in his skull protruding out. And they were so upset that did they just respect his wife's decision? No. They find Derek's mom that he was estranged from. Remember, she was the one that was getting drunk, never talked to him. The one that didn't raise him, basically. They find her and they're like, we need your permission to do a lobotomy on your 27-year-old estranged son against his will. Do you consent to this? And she's like, oh yeah, stunning, sounds good. So Derek was held down on the table and lobotomized. But the problem was, though, that the surgeons needed to keep him awake during the procedure because they wanted to see his pupils the entire time. They wanted to make sure they weren't doing too much damage in his brain so he could see them doing this inside of his brain. He could feel it. He was also forced to sing songs for them and do riddles while they're doing this. I mean, he said it was so painful. It lasted 8.5 hours because, well, I'm not sure why, because remember they said it could be done in 6 minutes. Derek remembers screaming through the entire operation and asking them to stop, begging them. He thought that they were going to kill him because the pain was that bad. But instead of stopping, the doctor leaned over and whispered into his ear, and I thought you were a tough guy. Look, I genuinely have no idea why they wanted to lobotomize the poor guy so much. Well, yes, I do. Derek wouldn't find out until later. But the doctors wanted to lobotomize Derek because other than his headache, he had no other mental illness. He wasn't anxious or depressed. He was otherwise mentally fine. So they wanted to see what would happen to someone who was mentally fine if they were lobotomized. They thought if they lobotomized the general population, just not people with mental illnesses.
Just the world?
Yeah, just the world. They thought that they could quell intense emotions of like anger. AKA, they thought that they could eradicate violence.
Wow.
So they're thinking, okay, if a mentally unstable patient who is this angry gets lobotomized, like you know how sometimes if you are mentally unwell, you might lash out and you might act out, and there might be moments of where you're not really controlling your body and you're not really in the right state of mind, right? So if you get a lobotomy and you end up peaceful, imagine what an already peaceful person would become with a lobotomy.
Math scientist
Yeah.
vibes.
So they thought this was the answer to world peace. By the time that Derek found out this bombshell, the 2 doctors that performed the lobotomy on him, they were already dead. And Derek was dealing with the symptoms of PTSD, and he would even suffer from horrific flashbacks nearly 12 times a day. He still can't walk far. He gets jumpy and nervous, and he has intense night terrors. I mean, it led to the complete disintegration of his first marriage. I mean, it was a lot. But finally, he was able to find peace in his life with the help of his second wife and their children, and even their grandchildren. But the fact that the lobotomy almost ruined his entire life is kind of crazy. So that's in Europe. let's talk about the US. This guy is the main reason lobotomies are often talked about as if it only happened in the US. His name is Dr. Walter Freeman, and he came from a line of doctors. His dad, his great-grandfather, his grandfather, they were all doctors and surgeons. But Walter, he wanted to stand out. He's like, my dad's a doctor, but I want to be a bit different. So he was fascinated by neuroscience. Mainly psychiatric patients were his main concern. He said he wanted to make their lives better. He had heard of lobotomies in Europe, but they didn't sound all that efficient. He wanted to do lobotomies, but he wanted to make it assembly line style. I don't know, I guess his intentions were good because he was thinking, if I make it faster, I can help more people and more people will be less depressed, right? That was his whole argument. Now again, overall, super questionable stuff. Walter really wanted to find a way to give lobotomies without drilling holes. So he came up with the iconic ice pick and hammer method. Sometimes it goes up the nose, sometimes it's through the eyeballs. The revealing of such a method was drama in the medical community. A lot of people were...
What is worse?
The eyes I can never do. I know I can't do the eyes ever. So Walter performed the new method on one of his patients in Washington, a housewife named Ellen Ionesco. Ellen was suicidal and depressed. Why, you ask? She had postpartum depression, which honestly is very serious, but it's also very common. But for some reason, Walter was like, no, I'm gonna stab you in the brain for it. I think Ellen was so desperate for any relief that she was willing to do anything at this point. She went along, her older daughter came along, and Ellen's daughter said, it was crazy. You know, before the lobotomy, she was absolutely, violently suicidal. After the lobotomy, there was nothing. It stopped immediately. It was just peace. I don't know how to explain it to you. It was like turning over a coin. That quick.
She happy, not happy?
Happy. So
Really?
whatever he did something right. Ellen showed immediate improvements of her mental health after the operation. Walter had all the proof that he needed that this method worked. So he wasn't proving that lobotomies worked, just that this method was a new method of performing lobotomies. And it worked. And he called it his 10-minute cure-all to mental health.
Imagine that.
Yeah, Walter was like a club promoter, but for lobotomies. He was out talking nonstop about his new method, and if he were alive today, he would be on every podcast promoting himself. It was a lot. Walter even claimed he didn't need sterile environments, a traditional operating room. He didn't even need to wear scrubs. He could just bring his little ice pick and hammer, boop, 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 you're done. No more depression. Cured. You're welcome. Even Walter's long-term partner who had been working with him quit because of Walter's deplorable operating standards. So Walter's on a roll. There's no stopping this man with a dream. His dream was to be the greatest in his field. And it's not like the alternatives to Walter were that great. Like I said, the mental health facilities were horrendous. There were no medications for psychiatric reasons, right? The only other option really was to be institutionalized and be abused. So people start flocking to Walter for his miracle cure. He was at the height of his career. Sometimes he would do 25 operations in a day. He traveled around the United States, spreading the word of his miracle cure, bringing miracles to all 50 Star-Spangled Banners states. And by then, he had a reputation that he was the king of mental health, pretty much. He was more of a showman, if I'm being honest, than a doctor. Sometimes he would do a demonstration where he would insert both ice picks at the same time, double fisting it to impress his fellow colleagues at the convention. And again, in his mind, he believed that he was changing the world. He was incredibly skilled in helping the world become a happier place. We even have one of his case studies to refer to. He had pictures of a patient 121. In the first picture he took of his first meeting with her, he just wrote in his notes, "Forever fights, meanest woman." Yeah, and she does look a little bit unhappy, but like, wouldn't you be if this random doctor was like, let me get a pic so that I can pick you later with my ice pick? And then she was lobotomized, and 11 days later, he took another picture where she's smiling, and he wrote underneath it, giggles a lot. Then he found her 4 years again after the surgery, and he took another picture and wrote about how she was happy with the procedure. She was even making better life decisions. Like, for example, she refused to marry her ex because he was an alcoholic, and she's able to hold down a job. So Walter was like, see, it worked. And it did. Like I said, a third of the patients said they felt better after being lobotomized. Now let me tell you about some of the other patients. Patient 121 did feel better after the lobotomy. Howard was a bit different, okay? Howard was physically, mentally, but emotionally a very different story. He was in the group where he didn't really say it helped him or hurt him, but he was traumatized from the event of being lobotomized. So Howard Doley was one of Walter's youngest patients. He was 12 years old when he was lobotomized. 12. He was the first patient, I believe, where they have a picture of his lobotomy. It's so terrifying.
What was it?
It's literally 2 ice picks sticking out of the kid's eyes. What's worse is that Howard just needed a friend in life. He did not need a lobotomy. His mom died when he was 5 and his dad got remarried, and Howard was having a hard time adjusting to his stepmom. Like, it was a lot. The stepmom just hated him. He never understood why, but it was clear that she would do anything to get rid of him. Which, I mean, yeah, I see it. Lou Doley, the stepmom, claimed that Howard was a horrible child and terribly behaved, and she claimed that she was terrified of him, scared to be in the same house as him. You're like, why? What did Howard do? He looked and acted like a SAVAGE. Okay, that's offensive, but how? Well, sometimes he didn't like going to bed, so when it was lights out time, he would turn on the lights. Sometimes he would turn on the lights during the daytime when it was still bright outside. And sometimes he would daydream, stare blankly into space.
Honestly, I feel like if lobotomy still exists today or in China,
You'd be lobotomized?
like my grandma will probably send me there.
Your grandma would lobotomize you? Why?
Yeah. She thinks I have a lot of issues, so she would
Why was your
do
issue?
things to fix me.
So anyway, sometimes Howard would just zone out and daydream, stare blankly into space, and she thought it was creepy and strange. Lou Doley felt like Howard needed psychiatric care for, I don't know, not using sunlight as his primary light source. It was weird. Either way, Lou took him from doctor to doctor to doctor, and they told her, nothing's wrong with your kid. If anything, I think he's a pretty well-behaved kid. But she wasn't having that. So she went to Dr. Walter Freeman, the miracle worker, and his note for that appointment said, Lou came in for a talk about Howard. Things have gotten much worse. She can barely endure it. I explained to her the possibility of changing Howard's personality via lobotomy. Lou said that she would definitely have to bring her husband, and she is bringing him to talk to me. So it was settled. Dr. Freeman would meet with Howard's dad, and as long as he got approval, 12-year-old Howard was going to get a lobotomy whether he liked it or not. And we know that Howard's dad must have agreed because, well, Howard was getting a lobotomy. Dr. Freeman wrote in his notes, Mr. and Mrs. Doley have apparently decided to have Howard operated on. I suggested they not tell Howard anything about it. And the next thing you know, a few weeks later, he's being strapped up to the operating table and getting ice picks stabbed into his eyeballs. Howard had practically no memory of the entire operation. He did say that whatever Lou was expecting, he believed that maybe Lou was expecting him to become so docile like a zombie that he was practically, and I quote, a vegetable. And that didn't happen. So she ended up resenting him more and hating him more for it. Even after he would do nothing but just exist, she would try and get him kicked out of the house. And it just wrecked his whole life. He was institutionalized, then incarcerated, and then he was without a home. He was relying heavily on alcohol, drugs. He would ask himself questions like, what did I do to deserve all of this? Can I ever be normal? Why didn't my dad do something to help? And he said, if you saw me, you would never know that I had a lobotomy. The only thing that you would notice is that I'm very tall. I weigh about 350 pounds, but I've always felt different. I always wondered if something was missing from my soul. I just have no memory of that operation, and I never had the courage to ask my family about it for the longest time. So after years, Howard finally confronted his father, and his dad was not considerate. He didn't even apologize. He just said, well, son, I got manipulated, pure and simple. I was sold a bill of goods, she sold me, and Freeman told me that it was going to be good. Howard would later say, I will never know what I lost in those 10 minutes with Dr. Freeman and his ice pick, but by some miracle, I didn't turn into a zombie. Or it didn't crush my spirit or kill me, but it did deeply affect me. Walter Freeman's operation was supposed to relieve my suffering in my case. It just did the opposite. Ever since my lobotomy, I felt like a freak. So I just felt like something changed in his brain. And he can't quite place it, but something's different. And so we've talked about those who are better. We talked about Howard, who said that he was kind of in the middle. Like, obviously he's traumatized, but he wouldn't say, oh, it was so much worse, right? But then we do have that group where they said it was, things just got so bad. And the most well-known case of this is Rosemary Kennedy, the sister of John F. Kennedy. the president. Her life turned out the opposite of JFK's. As far as Rosemary was considered, ever since she was young, she was almost like the black sheep of the Kennedy family. Her parents, super strict people, they had these insane expectations, hence one of their kids became the president of the United States, right? And Rosemary just struggled. She struggled to keep up with her overachieving siblings. She struggled to make her parents happy. We actually know a lot about her inner turmoil because she wrote this diary growing up, and she just hated feeling like she was always behind, that she never felt good enough. Some of her own family members whispered that maybe she was intellectually impaired because she couldn't keep up with her siblings. Okay, from the modern perspective, like, it's clear that she just could not bear the stress of her strict parents who did not show her love and support unless she was excelling in something. Honestly, we'll never know what happened behind closed doors in the Kennedy house. But it was just a lot. Rosemary just seemed like an eager-to-please daughter, but no matter what she did, it didn't seem to work. Her family didn't seem to be proud of her, so she resorted to just rebelling. Like, why keep trying, right? Rosemary was resorted to having severe mood swings and violent outbursts where she would scream and throw things across the room, and this was unheard of in the Kennedy family, which I'm like, really? Because, I don't know. But apparently it, like, shocked her parents to the core. They took her to see Dr. Freeman, the world-renowned doctor, and by then, Dr. Freeman was the best doctor to go to. His reputation preceded him. So he did the same thing that he does in every single freaking meeting, which is, you need a lobotomy. You are diagnosed with agitated depression, and I believe that a lobotomy is going to end your violent mood swings and rages, and you're going to be happy and content. Now, who knows the rest of the Kennedy story, or even what Rosemary thought about this, but we do know that Joe Kennedy took Rosemary to see Walter Freeman, and nobody in the family knew at the time that she was getting lobotomized. She was only 23 years old, but this is where it gets wild. Rosemary was conscious being lobotomized. So remember how the patients had to stay awake when their skulls were being drilled open into? Mm-hmm. Well, this new ice pick process, Walter typically put his patients to sleep. But with Rosemary, he kept her awake during the whole thing.
Why?
So either A, to attempt an attempt at impressing Joe Kennedy, you know, like, look at me, I'm such a good doctor. Or maybe he was so nervous to operate on someone who was so high profile, so he kept her awake to make sure that he could monitor her. Either way, it was a huge mistake. He kept Rosemary awake while shoving ice picks into her eyes, and he asked her to recite things like song lyrics while he stuck the ice picks in. And basically, he kept slicing into her brain until she became incoherent, and that's when he considered the operation a success. Because after a lobotomy for a few days, everybody is a bit incoherent.
Oh my god.
So he thought, as long as I get her right at the point where she's incoherent, I'm not going too far. So for the next couple of days, she's going to be incoherent like all of my other patients, and then she's going to get better. So the true extent of the damage done to Rosemary Kennedy, I mean, it wouldn't be clear at first because, again, they were prepped for her to be incoherent for a few days. It was normal for them to feel that way. They would have loss of mental and bodily functions, and they would have to recover. But with Rosemary, days passed, and she didn't show any signs of getting better. It didn't look like things would ever get better. Rosemary could only think and act like a child. She couldn't even control her own bladder. She couldn't walk. She couldn't follow simple directions. She couldn't form sentences. I mean, she was totally helpless.
So what did they do? Did they go after the doctor, or what's going on?
Rosemary Kennedy just became one of the patients that would be left far worse after the lobotomy. She was whisked away to a mental institution where she was forced to relearn basic functions, and she would never fully recover. She was known to break down frequently into incoherent baby talk or stare at a blank wall for hours. And great family, but the only one that really visited her regularly was her sister Eunice Kennedy. She would later go on to be one of the founders of the Special Olympics. Some say that she did it in Rosemary's honor. Rosemary died in the institution in 2005. And you would think that a botched operation on such a high-profile, powerful family member would be the end of Dr. Freeman's career. Mm-hmm. Well, you would be wrong. He kept operating for a few more decades. And the reason that he was out of practice was not because he woke up and realized that this was a terrible idea, but it was one of his earliest patients, Helen Mortensen. She was one of the first 10 people that Walter had ever operated on. Mm-hmm. And she had a lobotomy, and she loved it. It worked out great for her. But in 10 years, she felt like her symptoms of the mental illnesses were getting worse and flaring up again. So she paid Dr. Freeman another visit, and he lobotomized her again. So she had 2 lobotomies, a touch-up, if you will. And guess what? After the second lobotomy, she felt fantastic, better than the first time. But then 11 years passed, and the results were wearing off, and she didn't like that. So she came back and got a 3rd lobotomy, and it was her 3rd time where her luck would change. During the procedure, he hit a blood vessel in her brain, and it caused a hemorrhage. She survived 3 days in the hospital before she succumbed to her injuries and died. Her death resulted in a full-scale investigation into Dr. Freeman and his practices. The medical board revoked his right to perform surgeries, and I think it was around this time that Dr. Freeman woke up and realized, holy shit, that was not good. You know, maybe he got swept up in the fame or the idea of helping people, but after that, he sold his house, bought a van, and started driving around the country to track down old former patients to see how their lives turned out. Yeah. I'm not sure what he believed when he died or how he felt after talking to some of his old patients, because he would die of cancer, and he really never publicized his thoughts about lobotomies. And that's the story.
Wow.
Listen, it's weird. I get it. Mental health is so tricky to treat, and doctors get excited when they think they found new ways to help reduce the world of mental illness. And like, let's be real. If someone said this is a 10-minute cure, it's so tempting. Like, even I'd be tempted. I'd be like, yeah, are you kidding? I want to get rid of my anxiety. And I think that all cure-alls are probably just not that great. It's just too good to be true. So would you want a perfect society with no mental illness or violence, even if it meant that everybody had to be lobotomized? Probably not. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. And I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the next one. Make sure to check out ExpressVPN, linked in the description. See you guys tomorrow. Bye!